what is the impact of staying later to do this extra thing? The hero complex basically says, I need to be the one that saves not just the patient, but this hospital, this healthcare system. If I don't do it, everything will fall apart. It's very common for the healthcare system to still have this very powerful and very clear, often explicit culture of having the expectation of us as medical professionals staying late.
Reason for staying late, which is a little bit tangled with culture, is short staffing and what happens in hospital when, your co-registrar is not there, your other colleagues are off sick. The expectation is that because you are there, you're going to fill up this person's spot. You're going to do 2 people's jobs or 3 people's jobs or whatever it is.
Your desire to clear your to-do list has more to do with you wanting to control how you feel, chase a little dopamine hit, or get that sweet relief of having that list cleared. Then it has to do with you actually being an effective doctor.
Are you not leaving work on time because you're actually avoiding something outside of work? Like leaving work late, and that was convenient for me because that gave me the perfect excuse. Whilst I was being at work and being a hero and saving Mrs. Smith in bed 5, even though I wasn't supposed to be there and someone else was on call. So it's easier to say, I've got too much to do here.
The most important reason you're not leaving work on time is because you don't value yourself. Medicine will not miss you when you're gone. We really do need to give ourselves the gift of asking, what do I want from my life?
Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Becc.
And I am Christine Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors. Hello, our beautiful friends, our Dr. Humans. Welcome back to the podcast. And today's episode, where we're talking about something that I'm sure will stir up a lot of feelings, might even trigger you a little bit. We're talking about leaving work on time. If this is a triggering topic to you, I know there was a previous version of myself, and I still struggle with this at the moment, but there's a previous version of myself where if you suggested to me that there was some kind of topic to discuss with leaving work on time, maybe even some solutions, I would have been very, very resistant to that. I would have been so upset with you because I was in proper victimhood, and there was no saving me. There was just no saving me. And so what we're going to do today, Becc and I have come up with 7 reasons why you are not leaving work on time. And I just want to encourage you to stay and listen to the 7 reasons and see which ones apply to you, because if you do resonate with these, the good news is that this is changeable, and this might actually just get you out of the door on time in future. So we hope that you get so much from this episode, and we cannot wait to jump right in. So kicking off with reason number 7.
Reason number 7, my friends, look deep into yourself with this one, because I think that this will be present in either like small, subtle amounts or very big, obvious amounts for us as doctors. It is the hero complex. The hero complex basically says, I need to be the one that saves not just the patient, but this hospital, this healthcare system. And if I do not stay here and do XYZ, ABC, then the whole thing will crumble down. And I know I'm making it sound a little bit ridiculous by putting it in those terms, but just find that in your mind, guys. How often do we overstate the importance of even the very small things that we do? this concept of if I don't do it, then it won't happen and everything will fall apart. Or even a little subtle change of this, little subtle different version is if I don't do it, then it won't be done right, it won't be done properly, and then it will all fall apart. Then some kind of disaster will happen. And I think this is a really tricky one because what happens here is it starts from a very noble place. It starts from a place of basically, I just want to help. I just want to do the right thing. And with those thoughts, it is so easy to hear them and be like, yes, this feels right. So, and therefore, I'm going to charge down this path and do it. But those thoughts don't show the full picture. I love the concept of clinical significance because so often people will be like cause effect, like this creates that. 1 + 1 = 2. And we'll be like, yep, this is a fact that things will be better if I do this task. But when you are forced to think about the clinical significance in our medical literature, or here, I want you to think about it in your life, this extra question is something that you get to answer, which is, yeah, if I do this, I'll get this result. But that next intelligent step is asking, is that result clinically significant? Does this result actually make a difference? Does it make a big enough difference in particular to outweigh the cost to you? Because I think there's a reason that we get paid a lot more after the clock ticks over our full-time hours. And that's because we acknowledge as a society, we know that the time that we spend after our full-time hours costs us as people, as workers, a lot more too. That time becomes progressively worth more and more because it costs us more and more. And so it becomes even more important that we recognize and really question, what is the impact of me staying later to do this extra thing? Now, another part of this, I think, is recognizing that this hero complex likes to convince us that it must be us, that we are the ones who need to do it, or even that, somebody else could do it. Like we could feasibly see that somebody else could do it, but that little concept of, but maybe they won't do it right, maybe they won't do it as well as me, they won't do it as efficiently as me, it's better for me to just do it, right? And that deserves questioning too. This is all just a part of that hero complex lens that we put on and we use to justify, make an excuse for staying at work late. So again, this is incredibly common. I think I can hear you giggling in the background, Christine.
It's a learned behavior as well, the hero complex. It's so relatable. And I think I was really bad for the hero complex. I mean, I've got all of these 7 reasons for not leaving work on time, but this one was pretty bad. And it wasn't that I'm like, oh, I'm such a hero, like in a sort of an egotistical way. It was more that when I was working in some under-resourced environments, if I did go home or I didn't do the thing, it would actually get done badly. And so I would see the consequences of me not doing it, me not staying late. And so it was like an actual learned behavior. So I guess, yeah, it can definitely be us kind of getting in our own way. And, I went back to fully resourced environments and carried that behavior around, still terrified that something bad would happen if I wasn't there. And so I think it's just having that insight into like, where are you actually working and what is realistic? And will the whole world fall apart if you're not there? And also, the hospital system, like there's systems in place. The hospital employs a lot of different people around the clock, 7 days a week, so that you don't have to be there the whole time. So, it's not really on you, but I think it's just worthwhile having a wee look at that. Yeah, the hero complex is so relatable. So yeah, thanks for that, Becc. Number 6, the 6th reason that you might be staying at work too late, not leaving on time, is being overly available. So Okay, just dropping you into the situation. Have you ever just stayed a little bit late because you wanted to just get some stuff off your desk to give yourself a better tomorrow? Maybe you just wanted to work on some discharge summaries or something. So you sit there, especially when the medical records used to be paper. So you'd be with the medical records, right? So you'd be on the ward. And so because you're there, you're visible, right? You're so visible. So even though there's someone else who's supposed to be there and you actually finished an hour ago, the nurses can see you and you're so approachable and delightful that they will come up to you and continue to ask you for things, right? And then it's harder because you know them, because you like them, because they're your wee buddies from during the day shift. You might feel reluctant to say, actually, I'm not here, right? Because you disappoint them and they have that emotional response to that. So I just want you to really ask yourself honestly, are you doing that? If you are choosing to stay late, are you visible? Because you might want to sort of, even if you do choose on your own terms to stay late for whatever reason, just a little bit, to make tomorrow better, that is completely up to you. But could you do that in a way that you're not going to be seen? You're not going to be approached? Could you do this a bit more on your own terms? So yeah, that's number 6.
I remember when I did my first term as as an intern, and I was in the surgical ward, and overtime was just the norm there. And there were just always endless tasks to do. And I remember taking on this adaptation where I would walk around the ward every time. We had a little office off to the side, which is great because we were less available, as you're saying here. But every time I would wander myself into around the nurses' station where all the patients' beds were, felt like I just got flooded with nurse after nurse after nurse or allied health, whoever. Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And for whatever reason, right or wrong, I thought that a part of the reason why I got asked to do so much stuff just from being present was in part because I'd made myself so approachable. I'd walk in with a smile on my face. I would, present myself in this open way with all this energy. And I basically thought, you're asking for it. You're projecting to everybody that you have so many resources, you have so much time, that you are just so happy and delightful. And somebody asking you to do this task, it couldn't possibly knock you off your perch. You're clearly doing fine. And I made this little adaptation. I remember one day being like, all right, I am no longer going to be Miss Bubbly, easygoing, happy-go-lucky. I am going to look distressed every time I walk into this ward so that people stop asking me to do everything. It was just another way that I thought I made myself too available. By probably even mid-surgical term, I found myself being as unavailable outwardly as possible, spending as much time in the office. If it's important, they'll come get me. And also just with my persona being unavailable, 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 busy, I'm busy. I've got lots on my plate. By the time you're walking to the ward, you're going to the ward because you probably got a sick patient to review, probably got multiple other things to do. And that experience of people just being throwing more things on your plate is just so devastating. Anyway, super relatable, being overly available. And I should probably just say I'm not recommending my strategy of, wiping the smile off your face, but I have to say I think it worked.
Oh no!
So the next point, number 5, is culture in terms of reasons that we do not leave on time. And this one's a real tricky one, and I have a lot of empathy for it, but I also have some tough things to say about it. So what is culture? Culture is essentially the customs, the beliefs, the norms of a group or a society. And medicine certainly has a culture. And you guys, I'm sure you've noticed that even different hospitals, different healthcare systems and hospitals have their own little microculture as well. In fact, even different specialties and subspecialties have their different cultures. And with that, this comes with different norms, different expectations, essentially. It's very common for the healthcare system to still have this very powerful and very clear, often explicit culture of having the expectation of us as medical professionals staying late, whether it is because of something task specific, like this is a task that we in our culture expect for you to stay and complete or tick off your list before you go, or whether it is in a greater totality of you do all the work that ended up in your plate today. You do not hand it over. The after hours staff don't have the capacity because they're already, like, by default, when they come on, overrun, under-resourced. So what landed on your plate today, you finish. And anywhere on that spectrum, it's incredibly common for us to experience cultures that have this expectation in healthcare, unfortunately, still. I should say as well, this can even extend to rostered time off, for example, taking half days and things like that. So it can be very extreme. It can extend also to taking your annual leave and which particular times of the year you're allowed to take your annual leave or not, as well. My personal opinion on culture is I think that we give it too much power and too much say in our lives as doctors, as medical practitioners in medicine, because culture is something that I believe that we really should opt into based on our values. Particularly if you think about the culture from a religious perspective, or even culture from sort of a family unit perspective. These are things that we opt into because we like the philosophy of it. We like the results that it creates for us. And if at any point we find ourselves not liking the results that it creates for us, we have permission to leave that culture, that subculture. In the healthcare system, I don't think we often give ourselves this opportunity. And we don't do it, I think, because it's not easy. It really isn't easy to go against the dominant culture because, like I said, culture is made up of beliefs and expectations. And to people who are deeply within the culture, it is simply the truth to them. And it often comes with this really strong moral underpinning, whereby if somebody sees you acting outside of that culture, that is simply just their belief, what they believe is true and what they believe is moral and right in the world, and they can have very strong reactions to you. You can easily end up quite literally hearing or being told that you're not a good person because you're not accommodating to or complying with this cultural expectation. And it's really difficult to first sort of receive and hear that and just be on the other end of somebody else's judgment or expectation from that perspective. And I think what makes it even more difficult is you're very often doing that alone, right? By definition, the culture is going to be the dominant narrative, the dominant understanding of what's normal and acceptable. And you are choosing to step outside of that, often alone. But I want you guys to remember that that truly is an option for you. And not to feel like it's not an option just because it feels so hard and so terrifying and so isolating to execute on. But the truth is, culture, remember, it's just a set of other people's beliefs and expectations. It's not a rule book and it's not a manual for how to be a good person in your life and not even in the hospital system, just because other people say so. So, two things when it comes to culture as a reason that you are not able to leave work on time. One thing is, remember it's optional. Culture is not a prescription or set of orders that you must follow in order to work at that hospital or certainly to be a good doctor. And secondly, I want to encourage you that although it can be hard to deviate from the dominant culture, nothing feels better than showing up in a way in the world that aligns with what you truly think is the right and good thing to do. Because when you step back and you look at, as Christian and I are kind of unfolding with this episode a little bit, the consequences of being somebody who stays late, who works overtime, and with that also perpetuates the system for other doctors, you might find that if you give yourself a chance to define what you think a good doctor is, what you think is morally correct in this situation, when you paint that picture out, that might be this great, incredible driving desire that makes you truly want to and feel like it's worth it to stand alone in what you believe. So culture, tricky, a lot of empathy for the challenge of working with it. But I do just want to give you guys a bit of tough love in this space, because too many of us believe that the culture is sort of the end of story, bottom line, full stop, you must comply.
Yeah, and culture can be changed, can't it? And I think that feeds into our next reason for staying late, which is a little bit tangled with culture, is short staffing and what happens in hospital when, you know, your co-registrar is not there, your other colleagues are off sick, especially for a protracted amount of time, so the roster's not full. And some culture or norms that can happen around the place is that the expectation is that because you are there, you're going to fill up this person's spot. You're going to do 2 people's jobs or 3 people's jobs or whatever it is. And so I think that short staffing can be a very, I guess, common reason to be staying late. And you think, oh, well, obviously, like, we're short staffed, I had to stay late. But the truth is, and the more empowered way to see this, is that the hospital has given you a contract, and that contract has your expected hours, and nowhere in your contract does it say when Jimmy is off sick it's your problem to be Jimmy, right? No, that's not what your contract says. So a little bit building on what Beck's saying, as much as you might not have a choice in the moment in terms of there's work that needs to be done, and you might have to step up and do a bit of extra work and hopefully distribute it throughout the whole team and not just carry it all. Like, we've all been there. That does happen realistically. But what I would say in that situation is, if you are working overtime in that scenario, that I would be asking you to advocate to be paid, definitely, for that extra time, and to minimize it where you can. And I've been in this situation where it was protracted, really having to advocate for the hospital to hire someone else, provide support, find someone else to fill that role, whether it's locum or whether it's someone on a relieving term, shuffle something around so that you get more support whilst your colleague is absent. But I think sometimes when we're, especially at more junior levels of training, we don't realize that we can ask for that. We don't realize that we can speak to someone about that. But the hospital is a system and it's supposed to provide that. So it sounds really obvious to say it out loud, but I think that it's just a really important and really common scenario. So if you find yourself in that situation, don't feel like you have to just suffer it. You can definitely work with your hospital management system to get solutions, and put really healthy boundaries in place, such as the ones that are in your contract.
It might sound obvious, but to me, I remember, I think I was PGY2 before I was in the situation I was an oncology resident, and I remember my colleague was off sick, and I got a phone call from somewhere in administration. I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Am I in trouble? Because I would never talk to admin, you know, I would just went in, put my head down and did my job. And I remember being shocked, confused, very delighted that they were like, hey Beck, how you doing? Hope you're okay. Just letting you know, don't worry, we're working on getting you somebody to come and fill this gap that you're carrying at the moment. Shouldn't be long. We've got solutions. We're trying this person, this person, this person. Should be all good. And I was like, what? Because my understanding and expectation was, like you're describing, that you just have to mop it up. And actually, in retrospect, like even in the moment of getting that phone call, I was like, oh, actually, that makes a lot of sense, that I wouldn't just have to step up and do the job. was so normalized to just stepping up and coping with things as they happen in the hospital. But I would really just like to second what you've said here and normalize actually doing two people's jobs shouldn't be normalized. Actually getting cover for those days should be the absolute baseline standard, of course, because we don't work in a industry where that person who's off sick, you can just put their work on hold and they can come back and do it next week. That's not how it works in the hospital. The work just keeps rolling on. We just need to build up those reserves in our hospital staffing, which is obviously an incredible challenge. But just because it's a challenge and just because it's incomplete right now, it doesn't mean that the clinicians should take on that burden. They have enough to manage already without having to double their workload. So the next thing also throws me back to old naive me. We're up to number 3 now, closing in on number 1, chasing a finished to-do list. And oh my goodness, my perfectionists, sit back, open your ears and listen to this point. Your desire to clear your to-do list has more to do with you wanting to control how you feel, chase a little dopamine hit, or get that sweet satisfaction, or I'm not even going to say satisfaction, relief of having that list cleared, then it has to do with you actually being an effective doctor, right? I know that's hard to hear, but I say that with so much confidence because it's kind of circling back to almost the hero complex at the start again. You really have to question how clinically significant are all of these items on your to-do list, not just independently, but also recognizing the costs, right? The costs of working overtime, the cost of you pushing yourself beyond having nothing left in the tank. Truly, are you being an efficient, impactful doctor when you are just trying to get to the end of your to-do list? A great quote that I read on the All Wise Wisdomful Instagram, which was something along the lines of, when you reach an achievement, do you feel that joy and sense of accomplishment and satisfaction? Or is all you've ever felt relief? If you're a perfectionist, most of the time, what you feel when you achieve anything is nothing more than relief, because you had hung so much significance on completing the task, but also in particular so much potential self-judgment and a sense of failure on not completing the task, that when you do complete the task, that's the thing that allows you to rest and not go into that almost shame spiral that comes with not getting the jobs done, not getting the list ticked off, not having things complete. It takes a fair bit of insight and a fair bit of humility to recognize that a lot of what's driving our decisions in our days as doctors, not necessarily rationale, it's not necessarily wanting to be the best doctor, but just being driven by these kind of challenging mindset concepts of perfectionism and wanting to, soothe and reassure that imposter syndrome that we feel. Because, even if we didn't save any lives today, even if we didn't get to do all the other things perfectly in the day that we wanted to do here, at least I can say I finished my to-do list. I remember actually I finished a shift. It was like an after-hours shift, might have been the weekend or something. I handed over the day to the person who was covering the night. And I cleared the to-do list. Well, actually, I think I still had a couple little things left. And the person who I handed over to, he texted me, I don't know, at some point in the next 24 hours. And he was like, Oh my goodness, Beck, thank you so much. I had the best shift because you just like got everything done before. And this is honestly one of the most significant thoughts that I had in my mind from, all of the medical work I've done over the last, I don't know, it was 8 years or something like that. Just that simple little text message, because I got so much satisfaction and gratification from him saying thank you, from feeling like I was a really good colleague to him because I managed to, quote, set him up that way, which, to be honest, might not have even been the case. He might have just ended up having like an easy shift after that. All the stars aligned, da, da, da. But the point is, it made me feel so good to get that thank you and to get that, that you're a good colleague, you're doing a good job from my colleague, that I can see how addictive that could be for me to be like, I'm going to keep giving and giving and giving and giving, overdoing and overdoing and overdoing and overdoing, because then, I'll be a good colleague. I can tell myself I'm a good colleague and my colleagues like me. And so there are all kinds of directions I can see this driver to complete the to-do list coming from. But again, like, is that a good enough reason for me? Just me being able to tell myself I'm a good colleague, or somebody else thinking that I'm a good colleague, is that a reason that I want to drive the way that I make decisions in the day? Is that important enough for me to cut off time, the precious small amounts of time that I have for the rest of my life, clearing this to-do list? Just a question for you guys to ask yourselves too.
Oh my goodness. But the other thing is, I'm just so impressed that you felt like you actually had cleared the to-do list, because I feel like this is a little bit like in healthcare, a little bit like inbox zero. Like, I don't think that exists either. I don't know what they're talking about in productivity land, because in healthcare, it never ends. Like, I don't think anyone's inbox ever ends. And I don't think that this to-do list ever ends. Right? It just keeps going and going and going and going. So I think if your goal, if your expectation is to actually tick that off, as you're not understanding that like, basically some things can wait and some things can't wait, and you're just going to have to decide, because I think the goal should be not to clear the to-do list, but just to have enough done that all of the important things are done. And I think it's like finding that. So it's super interesting. So well done to you, Beck, for managing that.
That is such a good point. You're so right. And I think the only reason why I thought that is probably because he sent me that message. But you're so right. It's just like, even if you made it your goal, good luck.
It's not a goal I can achieve. So we've got a new goal. The new goal is, thinking about how we might reframe the to-do list, how we think about it. And that brings us to point number 2, another reason that you might not be leaving work on time. Now, this is actually this one's hard to hear. So I just want you to tune in and take a breath, because I'm about to say something that may or may not land with you, but it was my truth, so no judgment at all. Are you not leaving work on time because you're actually avoiding something outside of work? So, for example, I did this with my exams, right? I used to say to myself, I don't really have time to study, right? Because I'd be doing a lot of overtime and like leaving work late, and that was convenient for me. And we've talked about this on a previous episode about self-sabotage as well. That was very convenient for me because that gave me the perfect excuse. Whilst I was being at work and being a hero and saving Mrs. Smith in bed 5, even though I wasn't supposed to be there and someone else was on call, I would be like, well, I couldn't study tonight because I was saving Mrs. Smith, right? So it would be a really great way to get out of doing something I didn't really want to do, because it was uncomfortable studying for my exams at night when I was tired. But other things that can show up like this is, maybe you've joined a gym and you're supposed to be getting healthy, but actually you don't really feel like going to the gym. So it's easier to say, oh, I've got too much to do here. I've got all my discharge summaries to do. I cannot go to the gym tonight. Or real things, again, from real life. Maybe you've got a little bit of a conflict at home. Maybe you've had a fight with your partner. Maybe there's, I don't know, maybe like you've got friends staying with you, like maybe they're not your friends, maybe they're somebody else's friends, but they're in your house and you don't really want to go home and see them, all these things. Again, no judgment, just some examples. But one that comes up for me right now is traffic. Like I stay late at work and finish things off just whilst the traffic dies down. And whilst, I'm very privileged, I don't have like children or dependents that I have to go home at a set time for. So I'm allowed to do that, and it's a choice. It's still a little bit, I'm still staying late, because I'm trying to avoid something else, being the Melbourne traffic. So I guess I just wanted to pose that as a possibility, because I think when you're going through something and you are avoiding leaving work because of avoiding something at home outside of work, it can be something that you're not cognizant of in the moment. And so me saying this to you, past Christine would have had no idea. She would have found this very, very hard to receive. But past Christine was in her own way, and she was the queen of self-sabotage and continues to be that person to some extent. So I just want to say this so that if you are in that situation and maybe not leaving work on time is actually causing you some harm, so maybe you could go home and fix things up with your partner, or maybe you could go and get fit at the gym, or maybe you could go home and study for that exam that you need to pass because your career depends on it. Maybe hearing this, you might be more motivated to say, oh, actually, if I'm honest with myself, I could just leave on time and actually reach those goals.
That is so insightful. And I honestly think that is probably underlying, if not a part of the reason that so many of us don't leave work on time. Because even if I just think about the fact that at the end of the clinical day, I feel awful. These days can be so depleting. So you're like, what am I going home to? I'm going home to feel rubbish. That's like so many times I would feel like that after the end of the clinical day, like, wow, all I've got to look forward to is going home, eating some food, and then basically collapsing on the couch. And it doesn't paint the most enticing picture. And so it can feel so much better to just stay at work and be like, oh, look at me go, I'm contributing, I'm being productive, da 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 da. However, that leads us to our number one reason for not leaving work on time. That is the most important one for you guys to look into. So sit back, open your ears, give us a few moments here to let this one land, because we really want you to question this for yourself, answer this for yourself. And if you feel like this is one of your reasons, we need you to promise us that you will start the journey of changing this for yourself. The number one, because it is the most important reason for you not leaving work on time, is because you don't value yourself, right? Because medicine to you is more important than you as a person. It can sound incredibly noble. It can sound like almost an identity that you want to take on. I've heard some haunting perspectives on this, though, that I might just drop in here, which is, as important as your job is as a doctor, and as impactful as you are as a doctor, you truly change, save, transform people's lives. Medicine will not miss you when you're gone. You can go through your whole life entirely dedicated to medicine, giving up every piece, every scrap of yourself to medicine. And medicine won't be there at your funeral singing your praises about what a incredible person you were and how much you did for it. Zooming out, looking at your life as a whole and looking at the end of your life, we really do need to give ourselves the gift of asking periodically, more often than you think, what do I want from my life? What do I want for my life, and what do I want from my life? Because you will find so often that it's not working 60-hour weeks. And you'll find so often that accidentally, innocently, you have gone weeks, months, working beyond and giving beyond what you wanted to give. And I need you guys to underline recognize with no uncertainty here that that is an incredible act of disrespect for yourself. That's what it is. It's disrespect. You wouldn't impose that on another person. You wouldn't demand that somebody else did that with their life. You wouldn't demand that somebody else put aside their wants for their life to be able to, or in order to just give more to this insatiable healthcare system. You would never ask somebody else to do that. And yet you're showing up in your life that way each day, disregarding yourself, disrespecting yourself, devaluing everything that you can experience and enjoy in life. One of the things that I most want to see in doctors in general is a high level of self-respect. I think doctors are not only incredibly intelligent and hardworking, which are great recipes for an incredible life, but this really special thing about doctors is they're also, by selection, people who care very, very much. And with that, you're somebody who has the capacity to experience the most incredible, fulfilling life in terms of indulging in and exploring and enjoying all these different aspects of life, all the different people in your life, all these different creative pursuits. And if we had enough self-respect to listen to ourselves and what we want, and then give ourselves what we wanted, you can create so much more goodness in your life and in your experience than just in this one aspect of healthcare. There's so much more to life and so much more for you to give to life by being somebody who values themselves enough to listen and values themselves enough to execute on what's important to you.
In this episode where we're talking about not leaving work on time, I really maybe current versions of Christine does prioritize myself and what I want and what I want to do and stuff, because past Christine was hopeless at this. And so I guess what was coming up for me when you were talking about that in terms of placing value on yourself, especially when I was in my training and there were a lot of really sick people around, lots of things happening, but a key example that helps to bring this to life in terms of, because you might say, oh, I do value myself. Of course I value myself. What is Becc talking about, right? But where this showed up for me was leaving work on time when you had a child or another thing that seems so valid in society. Like if you've got a child, you got to leave work on time because obviously they're a vulnerable human and they need their adult to go and get them or whatever it is. So that feels understood. That's a good reason to leave work on time and no one's going to hold you back, right? Whereas me, who is childless by choice and even at that time, I'm sure even if you're going to have children, you might not have them during your training and things. But if you don't have children yet, then you might not feel like you have a good reason to leave, right? So, that, your co-registrar has kids. Oh, they'll go, I'll stay and I'll fix this. And it's kind of like saying, well, the things that I want to do, even if I don't have children to go home to, there might be something else that is important to me, a hobby or an interest or just having some time to myself or, just your well-being and getting all your basics right, sleeping. All of those things are important. And so I guess that's it could be the most simplest things, but just valuing just the fact that you want to leave work on time for your own well-being is enough of a reason to leave work on time. You do not have to justify yourself or your existence. And I feel like that was something that I learned slowly, very, very slowly. So I guess that's just a relatable example. And that's not to say there's anything wrong. Obviously people who have children, I'm not sort of trying to judge that in any way, but I guess I'm talking about my own experience where having not had children and feeling like somehow that made me less worthy of leaving on time sounds a little bit ridiculous to say out loud, but it was my lived experience for a bit. I guess just to give you that example in case you, like me, have that going on. So so those were our 7 reasons that you might not be leaving work on time. And if you have any more than those reasons, please feel free to drop them in the comments box below. We would love to hear your perspective as well. But we really hope that this episode has been helpful. We realise there's a lot of things in there that can be quite hard to hear, but Becc and I have lived through all 7 of these. And so no judgment from us, just hoping that this finds who it needs to find and helps who it needs to help. So with that, we hope that you'll take that on board, have a think about what applies to you, and maybe just get out of work on time so you can live your absolute best life and create the impact that you want to create in the world.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up in the clouds, but I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you.